I want you to think back to one of your earliest memories involving money. Chances are, you were very young, maybe 6 or 7 years old. You had a plastic piggy bank, probably filled with heavy coins, crinkled birthday money, and completely useless tokens. Your parents took you by the hand and walked you through the heavy, oversized glass doors of a local commercial bank in your neighborhood. Do you remember what it looked like inside? The floors were likely made of polished marble. The ceilings were incredibly high, echoing with importance. There were serious men and women in tailored suits standing behind thick bulletproof glass. There was an armed security guard standing quietly near the entrance. Everything about the physical architecture of that building was meticulously and purposefully designed by elite psychologists to broadcast 2 incredibly powerful words directly into your subconscious mind. Those 2 words were absolute safety. You handed over your tiny handful of crinkled dollar bills to the bank teller, and she handed you back a little paper passbook. She smiled and told you that your money was now safely locked away inside the massive steel vault in the back room. She told you that the bank would keep it completely protected from the dangerous world, and as a reward for being such a responsible, smart little citizen, the bank would even magically pay you a few extra pennies in interest every single year. That exact moment, standing on that cold marble floor, was the precise moment you were successfully indoctrinated into the single greatest, legally sanctioned financial conspiracy in the history of human civilization. That was the moment your brilliant, endlessly capable human brain was programmed to believe that a bank is a fortress designed to protect the working class. Today, we are going to burn that childish illusion completely to the ground. My name is Bill, Dollar Bill. And before we aggressively expose exactly how the global banking cartel uses your own hard-earned fear to systematically transfer your wealth directly into their corporate dividends, I want to formally welcome you to the channel. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your highly valuable, irretrievable time with me today. Let me know directly down in the comments section exactly what city or state you are watching this investigation from. I always love seeing our global reach. And if you have the courage to unlearn the financial lies you were told as a child, please leave a like, hit that big subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell so we can keep building undeniable, invisible wealth together. For the first 30 years of my life, I fundamentally believed the lie. I went to college. I got a highly respectable corporate job. I drove a deeply sensible used car, and I sacrificed my weekends so I could aggressively save money. Every single time I got paid, I proudly took 20% of my paycheck and transferred it directly into my high-yield savings account at a top-tier national bank. I treated my savings account like a sacred scoreboard. I watched the numbers slowly tick up. $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. I thought I was winning the game of capitalism. I felt secure. I felt intellectually superior to my friends who were aggressively blowing their salaries on financed sports cars and bottle service at exotic nightclubs. I genuinely believed that by hoarding government-printed paper inside a glowing digital application on my smartphone, I was building an indestructible financial empire. And then, one incredibly quiet Tuesday afternoon, I sat down, opened a spreadsheet, and forced myself to completely learn how the macroeconomic banking system actually functions behind the heavy velvet curtain. I learned the dark, unsexy mechanics of fractional reserve banking. I completely stopped saving my money in the bank. I pulled the plug. I aggressively moved my capital. And what happened next completely revolutionized my entire existence. To understand why keeping your wealth in a bank is mathematically equivalent to holding a block of ice in your hands while standing in the middle of a scorching desert, we must conduct a brutal autopsy on exactly what happens to your cash the precise second you deposit it. When you log into your banking app and see a balance of $50,000 sitting safely in your savings account, your brain visualizes a crisp, neat stack of $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands, sitting securely on a dark shelf inside a massive steel vault patiently waiting for you to return. This visualization is a complete hallucination. Your money is not there. It left the building before you even got back to your car in the parking lot. Banks are not philanthropic storage facilities. Banks are aggressive, hyper-optimized financial machines entirely designed to actively leverage your fear of risk to generate astronomical returns for their elite shareholders. The entire global banking system operates on a mechanism famously known as fractional reserve banking. Let me break down the brutal math of this system so you can see exactly who is paying for the marble floors and the mahogany desks. You walk into the bank and deposit $10,000 of your hard-earned, highly taxed, blood, sweat, and tears money. Because of fractional reserve banking regulations, the bank is legally required to keep an incredibly tiny fraction of your money, often hovering around 10% or sometimes much less depending on the current monetary policy, in actual physical reserve. Let us say they keep $1,000 in the vault just in case you need to withdraw some cash for the weekend. What happens to the remaining heavily leveraged $9,000? The bank immediately turns around, walks out the front door, and aggressively lends your exact money to somebody else. They lend it to your wildly irresponsible neighbor so he can quickly finance a brand new $70,000 truck at 8% interest. They lend it to a college freshman in the form of a shiny premium credit card so she can buy designer clothes and pay 24% compounding interest on the revolving balance. They lend it to massive commercial real estate developers to build shiny skyscrapers at 7% commercial interest rates. Your money is out in the wild, working incredibly hard, literally sweating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Your $10,000 is aggressively generating absolutely massive compounding financial returns. But here is the devastating, sickening punchline of the joke. You are not getting any of those massive returns. The bank is keeping entirely all of it. The bank takes all the intense, crippling risk using your money, harvests all the enormous 24% credit card yields using your money, and in return for allowing them to completely prostitute your capital upon the open market, the bank graciously turns around and pays you an insulting, universally laughable 0.05% annual percentage yield on your savings account. If you leave $10,000 in a standard national bank for an entire year, the bank will wildly generate thousands of dollars in profit from lending it out. In return, they will deposit roughly $5 into your account. $5. You cannot even purchase a heavily watered-down iced coffee at a corporate drive-through window with the annual returns the bank pays you for, providing them with the raw, highly valuable fuel required to run their multi-billion-dollar global empire. You are actively providing the absolute lifeblood of the global wealthy elite, and you are accepting a fraction of a microscopic penny as your compensation, simply because the polished marble floors make you feel emotionally safe. But feeling emotionally safe is not the same as being mathematically secure. The robbery of the commercial banking system does not stop at the insulting microscopic yields. There is a secondary, far more insidious, completely invisible thief operating simultaneously in the deep shadows. This thief does not wear a mask. This thief does not break into your house through a cracked window in the middle of the night. This thief is entirely legal, heavily mandated by the central governments of the world, and universally accepted as a standard cost of living. I am talking about the silent compounding cancer of aggressively printed fiat currency. I am talking about inflation. When you leave $50,000 securely sitting in a bank account over a span of 5 years, and you log into your banking application every single morning, the glowing digital numbers never change. The screen proudly displays $50,000 today. It displays $50,000 tomorrow, and it will proudly display $50,000 in the year 2030, because the numerical value never violently shifts downwards. Your highly emotional human brain is tricked into believing that you have not lost a single penny. You feel completely victorious because you successfully avoided the terrifying volatility of the stock market. You feel superior to the people who bought real estate. But you are staring at a heavy mirage. Currency is not wealth. Currency is strictly a temporary, extremely flawed measuring stick for purchasing power. Wealth is defined solely by how many actual goods, services, calories, and actual human labor you can successfully exchange your currency for in the real physical world. If we look at the official Consumer Price Index, which is fundamentally a heavily manipulated, extremely conservative metric designed by governments to aggressively hide the true terrifying extent of currency devaluation from the working class, they will tell you that inflation historically averages around 2 to 3% per year. But if you walk into a grocery store, or attempt to purchase a decent used car, or try to buy a single-family home in any vaguely desirable suburban neighborhood, you instinctively know that the true cost of human living is expanding much closer to 7, 8, or even occasionally 10% per year in certain severe macroeconomic cycles. Let us use a highly conservative rate of a 5% true cost of living expansion to conduct this mathematical autopsy. If you heavily hoard $50,000 in your savings account, completely terrified of the outside world, that money is actively losing 5% of its purchasing power every single 12 months. In the first year alone, the invisible thief silently breaks into your bank account and fundamentally vaporizes $2,500 of your sweat equity. The numbers on the screen still say $50,000. But if you take that $50,000 to the market, it can now only purchase exactly what $47,500 could buy you the year before. You have been quietly robbed. Fast forward this horrifying mathematical reality over a standard 5-year cycle. Through the ruthless laws of compounding inflation, you're perfectly safe. Wonderfully protected $50,000 has silently bled out over $12,000 in raw, unadulterated purchasing power. You effectively worked thousands of hours in a cubicle, gave up hundreds of weekends with your children, suffered through unbelievable amounts of corporate stress, strictly to save $50,000. And because you fundamentally believe the lie that banks are safe vaults, you slowly allowed 25% of that hard-earned life energy to successfully evaporate into thin air. Keeping massive amounts of liquid cash in a commercial bank is not a financial strategy. It is not an act of responsibility. It is mathematically identical to eagerly storing massive blocks of solid ice in your garage during the peak heat of a brutal, sweltering summer, incredibly proud of how much ice you own, while completely ignoring the rapidly growing, entirely useless puddle of filthy water rapidly forming around your shoes. When this terrifying, completely undeniable mathematical reality finally penetrated my brain, I felt an intense wave of absolute physical nausea. I realized that my profound desire for perceived safety was the exact specific mechanism actively keeping me tragically poor. I realized that the bankers were wildly relying on my financial illiteracy to securely fund their yacht payments. So what actually happened when I decisively pulled the plug and stopped saving money in the bank? The very first psychological barrier I had to violently smash was my deeply ingrained definition of what a bank is supposedly used for. I entirely stopped looking at my checking account as a permanent long-term storage facility. Instead, I radically redefined my banking applications as temporary, highly active transit hubs. A bank is nothing more than a busy train station. Things are supposed to arrive, and they are supposed to immediately depart. You do not park a train in the middle of a busy station for 5 years and expect it to magically grow taller. I aggressively calculated my absolute baseline survival cost. How much capital did I practically need to comfortably survive exactly 6 months if the global economy collapsed entirely and I completely lost my job? I calculated my rent, my basic groceries, my minimal insurance, and absolutely nothing else. I arrived at a highly specific number. I left exactly that emergency fund amount sitting lazily in a high-yield savings account. I accepted the incredibly minor loss to inflation on that specific pile of money strictly as an insurance premium for psychological peace of mind. But every single dollar that I earned violently above that specific magical threshold, I immediately fired it from the bank. I evicted the money. I stopped allowing my cash to safely lounge around in the vault, making bankers disgustingly wealthy. I forced my lazy sleeping dollars to put on heavy steel-toed work boots, pick up a shovel, and walk aggressively out into the brutal open market to work exclusively for me. Money is not supposed to be a comfortable passenger on the ride of your life. Money is supposed to be a ruthless, highly efficient, tireless soldier and massive army that you completely control. I took all of my excess capital and I aggressively deployed it entirely into hard, fundamentally scarce assets and broad market global equities. I started aggressively buying fractional ownership of the top 500 most successful, most wildly profitable, aggressively ruthless corporate machines actively operating on the face of planet Earth. I started buying heavy slices of the S&P 500 index. When you aggressively move your capital out of a depreciating fiat currency sitting in a bank and confidently transfer it directly into a broad market index fund, you undergo a profound, permanent psychological metamorphosis. You abruptly stop being a frightened consumer, terrified of prices rising, and you instantly become an owner of the very system that drives the prices up. When you own a heavy piece of the S&P 500, you effectively own a tiny, undeniable microscopic slice of Apple, of Microsoft, of Amazon, of Visa, of massive healthcare conglomerates, and giant global energy producers. You are purchasing the physical, highly productive labor of millions of the smartest, most desperate, most highly educated engineers, executives, and innovators on the planet. They are waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. They are sacrificing their health. They are drinking terrible coffee, optimizing massive global supply chains, constantly inventing new complex software, and aggressively fighting each other to generate ridiculous corporate profits. And because you aggressively pulled your money out of a dying bank account and securely purchased shares in their labor, a specific fractional percentage of every single dollar of profit they violently generate globally flows directly, silently, and eternally right back into your net worth. This is the exact secret. The marble floors and the bulletproof glass were passionately designed to forcefully hide from you. When massive inflation hits the economy, and the central governments frantically print trillions of new colorful pieces of paper, the poor and the middle class who are hoarding cash entirely suffer. But the elite wealthy who completely own hard assets fundamentally sleep like babies. Because when the fiat currency violently loses its value, the fundamental mathematical price of the underlying hard assets and the CORPORATE index funds strictly adjusts aggressively upward to perfectly match the massive wave of new fake money. The companies in the index fund simply aggressively raise the prices of their coffee, their software subscriptions, and their consumer goods to instantly match inflation. They pass the massive bloody cost directly down to the financially illiterate consumer, and they swiftly pass the massive adjusted profit directly safely upward to the owners of the capital. When I stopped heavily saving cash and started aggressively acquiring productive assets, my profound anxiety regarding the future entirely vanished. I no longer care if the Federal Reserve prints $1 trillion tomorrow morning. I no longer frantically check the interest rates on a basic savings account, because I understand that safety is a complete manufactured illusion. The only genuine safety residing in the modern, fiercely competitive capitalistic framework is aggressively owning the means of production. You have been systematically trained to be an obedient employee, an eager consumer, and a terrified depositor. You have been perfectly trained to forcefully hand over the highly valuable fruits of your irreplaceable human labor to a giant corporate institution that uses your energy to actively enrich themselves while politely returning to you pennies wrapped in heavily manipulated smiles. It is time to violently break the cycle today. It is time to look aggressively at the balance sitting lazily in your banking app and recognize it for what it truly, terrifyingly is: unemployed, highly lazy soldiers sitting comfortably in a barrack, completely ignoring a raging war happening directly outside the window. If you keep your army safely locked in the bunker, they will never, ever successfully conquer new territory for you. They will simply slowly starve to death, quietly bleeding out from the invisible ravaging disease of rampant compounding inflation. You must take complete control. Draft your survival reserve, calculate your true defensive line, and then forcefully order every single remaining dollar you hold to violently march out into the open markets and relentlessly acquire productive, cash-flowing assets until the day you permanently close your eyes. This is not complex financial engineering. It is the absolute foundational baseline truth of mathematical reality. So here is the incredibly vital question you must honestly answer tonight, before your head ever touches the pillow. Are you going to continue gracefully subsidizing the massive luxury yachts of global bankers because you are secretly terrified of market volatility? Or are you going safely and methodically completely transform from a highly anxious victim of inflation into the permanent, unshakable owner of your own magnificent financial destiny? Thank you so much for deeply watching and actively listening today. I truly appreciate you spending your absolutely vital time aggressively dissecting the banking matrix with me. If you are entirely ready to confidently start recruiting an army of capital and finally stop being robbed completely blind by the illusion of safety, forcefully hit that like button right now. Securely subscribe to the channel, and I'll powerfully see you in the next video. Stay brilliant, but far more importantly, stay entirely free.